What's up everyone, welcome to another episode, this time as I'm on the road, coming to you from a rather random hotel room. And as I don't have any of my bikes with me here, of course, I thought that I'll use that time to talk to you about the recent Mallorca trip that I did together with a friend of mine, because I've been getting a couple of requests to hear a little bit more about the logistics, where we stayed, how did we sort it out, what have been the cost, and so on and so forth. So how did we get there? What location did we choose to stay? How did we find our stay? Which routes did we ride? And then maybe also very importantly, the fifth point being on how expensive was everything? And I think maybe how cheap could it get if we would have planned a little bit smarter, even though it was already quite cheap. But we'll get to the financials at the end. As you might know, I'm based in Berlin, so I was also flying out of there. I was considering if I want to take my bike with me or if I should rent one on site. But as I just recently got my Standard Triebwerk, I really want to put it to the test and see how this bike actually climbs, and hopefully also show off that you can climb all those steep hills and long mountains with a steel bike. I decided to bring my Triebwerk to Mallorca. I luckily already had a bike box which I bought a couple of years back. It was one of the rather cheap ones, but it feels to be the most sturdy one. I had one from Evoque back in the day, which was I think the most expensive bike bag that I've ever bought. And it took one trip to Mallorca and back for I think EasyJet back in the day crush my seat post through the down tube, because that was just a design of how this bag was made, and it was a soft bag, so it wasn't as protective as a hard shell. So I went back to my rather cheapish hard shell case, packed everything nicely up. I went on kayak.com to find some nice cheap flight solutions and combinations, and I found a nice flight that got me with Ryanair to Mallorca and with EasyJet back. The plan was to stay for 5 days, so this is what we did. We went there at the very last week of January this year, and then we had to keep on planning on how are we going to be moving around in Mallorca. So the next item on the list was to book a car. So for the car, I went on to Check24. I still know the car prices from when I was there with the family in the past season, and I remember rather horrendous prices of, I think we paid 120 euros per day, staying there for almost 2 weeks. So that adds up quite quickly. So I was kind of prepared for this to actually be quite a big cost driver of this trip as well. But I was obviously wrong, because it seems like end of January isn't a peak season for tourists, which means that the prices for the cars also massively drop. And I'll give you a nice list at the very end of the video of what the cost of all the individual positions have been. But I was very happily surprised that the costs of the car have been very, very small, especially when you're comparing it to 120 euros per day during the main season. We booked via Check24, which is basically just a price comparison portal, which I think you might have something similar in wherever you are based. And they recommended, or the cheapest price or best package was at a company called Thrifty, which I think is the budget brand of one of those bigger brands like Hertz or Europcar. I don't really remember which one it was, but they gave us a nice Dacia Duster, which was definitely big enough for the two of us sitting in the front and then putting the rear seats down and putting the bike box in there. What I can always recommend is watch out if they try to pitch you an upgrade or a new car or an automatic or whatever. I always try to get the most scratch up or bumped up car that one can find, because that just makes it very easy, I would say, when it comes to returning the car. Because if they hand you a brand new car, they're obviously going to be way more picky when it comes to dents and scratches in comparison to a car that already looks like it went through rough times. Then also, where did we stay and how did we find the stay? So we went pretty straightforward and classic on Airbnb and looked for a place up in the very north, so pretty much almost the furthest away from Palma, in a little town or little city called Poyenza. It is a place where I already stayed, I think 2 or 3 times with family beforehand. It is a beautiful little town, as I said, at the very, very top north. And I would say location-wise, for me, it was very perfect because it is very close to some epic climbs and epic routes that I'm going to be touching in a second. So initially we wanted to actually organize a rather bigger trip with I don't know, 4, 5, 6 people, but yeah, in the end this whole idea came up pretty spontaneously. The idea was big with traveling with a big group of cyclists, but in the end it turned out that it was only the 2 of us traveling, but we still got an apartment which I think was able to host up to 6 people. So yeah, we had 2 rooms with proper king-size beds and another room with 2 single beds, so you could go with 2 couples and 2 friends, or just 6 friends which are comfortable with sleeping in the same beds. So yeah, obviously this was completely over the top for just the 2 of us, but the price was still attractive enough for us to book it, and it had a nice outdoor pool, which is something that I think we really wanted, because I made that experience in the past years that even after coming back from a 5-hour ride from Sacalobra, where normally when I would come back from a regular flat ride in Berlin after 4 or 5 hours, my legs would be burning the next day and there would be no way for me getting back on the bike. In the past years, when I was coming back from Sacalobra and I was jumping into a really cold pool for, I would say, 10 minutes, I was somehow ready to ride the next day, and I didn't really have any sore muscles in that regard. So we needed that pool. We also had a sauna in there, which kind of gave this place a little bit of fancy vibe, but in the end we didn't really use that at all, because after the rides it was rather eating and chilling, and that was pretty much it. So the main thing to keep in mind is it is the off season, which means that I would say 4 out of 5 restaurants are gonna be closed. But especially in Poyensa, we still had enough options there to find a place for dinner or for lunch. And we also had the car, our beautiful Duster, which we took out a couple of times to basically just drive into Palma and have some dinner there and do a little bit of sightseeing and walking around there. So most of the time, I would say we've been pretty consistent with going to restaurants rather in the evenings for dinners, while for lunches, one of us was always cooking. We just basically went to the supermarket, either the local one or there is a big Carrefour very close to the airport where I did my first stop while I was waiting for Ingo to arrive. And we shopped up a bunch of pasta, tomato sauce, cheeses, bread, and so on and so forth. So we had enough carbs to load up before we went out on a ride. So now let's talk about the routes and why we actually picked Poyensa. So the upside of Poyensa is that you leave the house or the apartment with your bike. You don't need to drive by car anywhere. And if you turn to the left, you basically are cycling up or towards Cap de Formentor, so the beautiful lighthouse. You have 2 climbs, 2 big climbs in there. One basically to like a viewpoint, also a nice evening climb if you only, for example, have 1 hour because you're working remotely or whatever. And you want to hammer out a little climb before the sun sets. So this is also like a great 1 hour effort or 1 hour round trip back and forth. But then after that, you have a nice little descent and then another proper climb to the lighthouse. And if you basically leave the apartment and then turn to the right, you're already on your way to Sacalobra, which is of course the other epic ride that we did. So we cycled up all the way to the point where you have the street going underneath itself. I think it's a pretty legendary spot that I guess we've seen on a bunch of pictures and other YouTube videos already. And then from there, you have a really, really long descent. I think that it is a 7-minute descent. So it is fantastic. It is great fun. But of course, while you're riding this down, I constantly kept in mind that I'll have to be climbing this up again, which was a little painful thought, and then even more painful for the legs once we actually turned around at the bottom of Sacalobra and started the climb back up. But once you get back home from that ride, I really have to say you have this massive feeling of accomplishment, and it's just beautiful for resetting your mind, clearing your head, and views and weather and taking it all in. And then how we did this, I think we did the Cap de Formentor ride twice. At the last day we did the Sacalobra ride, and in between those 2 bigger climbs we had one recovery day where we did a 60 kilometer, I think, kind of just flat loop around a couple of towns, which was also beautiful. It was a rather fast ride, which was great to just like relax the legs and yeah, have, I would say, minimum climbs in there. I'm also going to be linking those routes in the comments, so you're going to find links to my Strava in there in case you're interested and you want to follow our footsteps and yeah, take it from there. And before we get into the cost of this whole trip, I just quickly want to comment on yeah, the weather that we had. I mean, it was the end of January, where we've been coming from a rather depressive, I would say, rainy, gray Berlin into beautiful 18 to 20, 21, 22 degrees, all day sun, no rain at all. Yeah, fantastic weather conditions for cycling. I mean, of course, when you leave very, very early at like 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, it's still going to be cold, so you still might want to have your arm and leg warmers out. But most of the time we've been leaving the apartment around 2, except for the Sacalobra ride where we actually left quite early. And yeah, then you're basically just cycling in 18 to 20 degrees, which is just a fantastic feeling to do this in January. So I would say that these are yeah, the two advantages that you have when actually cycling in the off season, because of course on one hand you get the amazing cycling experience that you just get from Mallorca, but then also on the other hand you get that little escape from yeah, rather depressive gray winterish weather still into yeah, a beautiful almost summerish vibe. So yeah, it's basically a double escape from your day-to-day. So let's talk about the cost. I got my Excel sheet for this here. So let's start with the flight. The flight itself was 83 euros with, as I said, with Ryanair to Palma and then with EasyJet back to Berlin. So rather cheap, I would say, but you gotta add to this that I want to bring my own bike, of course, so I also have to book some additional check-in luggage, and yeah, sports equipment is particularly expensive. It's also 2 airlines that you need to book it with, so in total I needed to add 110 euros extra to get basically the bike box from Berlin to Palma and from Palma back to Berlin. So this is something depending on your own taste, also how long you're staying there. Doesn't make sense to bring your own bike, or are you fine with renting one, especially when you're coming there in the off season? I think there are plenty of options to rent a bike for a good price somewhere, because availability should be quite given, I would say. My friend Ingo, he also rented a bike from an amazing place called MA13, which is, I would say, a hotel or a stay for cyclists, where they have a beautiful kitchen, amazing coffee machine, a great workshop for bikes, and they also do bike rental there as well, normally for guests, but as I said, as it was the off season, we've been able to yeah, to get hold of one of those bikes. So yeah, thanks a lot to Jan Erik for that. And yeah, let's continue on the cost. For, as I said, for the car that we rented, we paid 124 euros for the whole 5-day stay, which I think is a great catch. And that was already including full-on insurance. So yeah, that's pretty much a package deal. Also, just to let you know, in regards to the flight cost, I was also only traveling with hand luggage, because I was able to put all my bike clothes and shoes and helmet and so on and so forth into the bike box. So that was also contributing to having a rather low price there. So next, let's talk about the villa. I mean, you've seen the villa, how big it was. Obviously way too big for just the two of us, but it still only did cost 740 euros. I'm saying only because I also know the villa prices, how they are during the main season, and this is really yeah, a catch, I would say, for that price, especially for that size. But just imagine if we would have planned this properly, and we would have had a month longer to plan, we would have communicated this properly with our friends and planned around their availability as well. We would have split that 740 euros across 6 people, pretty much resulting in only 120 euros per person, which I think would be a ridiculous deal, driving the price of this whole trip even further down. So if we now take those costs and yeah, we take the villa price and the car price and cut it in half, because of course it was 2 of us and we've been splitting the expenses equally, and then we add to this the cost of my flight and also the cost to get my bike box back and forth, at least I'm landing on an all-in price of 625 euros for a 5-day stay, where I think that the experience that we had and escaping this depressive winter and going on this amazing cycling trip is definitely worth the cost. But imagine if we would have been able to do this with 4, 5, or even 6 people and actually properly book out that villa, which is driving the highest cost. This number would have gone down quite significantly. So yeah, this is my summary of the recent Mallorca trip. I hope it answered the questions that I've been getting so far. If you have any additional questions that I didn't cover yet, just feel free to drop them down in the comments. I guess you might have noticed that I'm quite active in getting back to everybody that's commenting on my videos. So yeah, I'll try to provide you with any information that you might still be seeking. And yeah, I can only motivate you to consider going out, taking that trip to Mallorca, especially during the off season. So yeah, I think it's also a great place to go even in January and yeah, save some money there. It doesn't always have to be peak season when everybody is cycling on the island. So with that, as always, I would say thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.